Testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Yes, sir. Sounds good. Okay. All right. Thank you. Well, if you can, give us your, if you can give us your name and your sort of educational and occupational background for us.
Well, my name is Martyn Stubbs, with a Y. My educational background is the British Columbia Institute of Technology. I'm a graduate in the communications. I have a communications degree. And from there, I went to work for Dick Clark Productions. I was a Canadian, the token Canadian, that they had to hire. It was a wonderful experience. I have the highest respect for Dick Clark. And from there, I didn't go back to Los Angeles when the program we were working on went to the States. I decided to go into local access television and work within the community. And local access television in Canada is a requirement of the cable company. They have to give 5%, which means you're more Walt Disney. Your job is to really give the right people with the right motives television time. And the cable company has to have the station because Canada has 98% cable saturation. So that's quite a lot of basic revenue. And this is a wonderful medium of television, and people need to use it to talk to each other within a community. So I was in charge of many community stations. One was in a farm belt, and therefore there were farming programs. One was suburbs. And we tried to always do something that had an effect, that there's a consequence at the end. If people needed help, adult daycare center or something, we would make them a tape. They could go to the local council, or we could show it. Those type of things.
Great. And tell me a little bit now about how did you get first involved with acquiring these NASA images? How did you get set up? Technically, how did it occur, and how did you discover these images? If you can just tell that story for us.
The way this whole thing started for me in terms of the NASA video was STS-48. I'd seen that footage, and I thought, I'm not sure what this is. And at the time, I wasn't aware of the NASA channel. And I also wanted to facilitate a person that was going to honor a UFO publisher called John Magor, who published the Canadian UFO magazine before anybody, it was early. And he was in his 90s, and he's now passed away. So like a good television producer, I researched my topics. So I sent away for the MUFON Journal. And the MUFON Journal, it turns out I was a member of MUFON. And then before I knew what had hit me, I was the provincial director, a.k.a. state director. And then I began to discover that that there was a black hole at the end of this thing. Everybody was bringing in farmer in the field videos. And with respect to the UFO community, how can a scientist verify, a picture of something in the sky when even the people that shoot it are guessing? So I, being a kind of a space lover, and really love what's going on with the Canadian Space Agency, and I was also interested in jets and sprites and elves, and also Dr. Lou Frank's house-sized small comets of water. And the reason that I was interested is just because they were a great mystery. And then when I was in MUFON, I realized that the only way really to check on any phenomena is to do the same thing, use NASA's own cameras. And so I checked into it, found out that the NASA channel existed, and from there I decided that I wasn't sure if it existed, if FCS-48 was real or whatever they were saying about it. I like space, and so I wanted to see the greatest triumph at the time that NASA did, which was the HST Hubble Space Telescope. 94, they fixed it. You know, there were 9 spacewalks, and I just thought, you can't lose on this. I have a bank of videotape recorders in my office, you know, for logging other things, and tons of these tapes that, you know, you're required to turn over because you always want your audience to have the best quality. So I just set them all up on automatic and went about my community access job. And, you know, after this enormously long mission, I took them home and started looking at them. And from there, I contacted MUFON and said, you know, gee, I found something. Would you come on, send somebody? You know, even though I'm your provincial director, I really would. What do you think? So the Canadian National Director came up, whatever that means, and meaning the head bureaucrat, which, you know, bureaucracy, came up, saw the images, and told me, and this is somebody I thought was a friend, told me not to release these videos, not to put them on television. And I didn't know what I'd found, and so I just wanted to put it out there and move on. But as soon as MUFON started telling me, whatever you do, sending things, threats almost, you know, I resigned on the spot, said a conflict of interest. I'm a television producer, and I'm going to put the show on. I made a program, and I didn't say a thing other than I found another fellow not associated with the bureaucracies of the UFO groups. And this person, we sat there, and I would say, what do you think that is? And he would say, I don't know. And so it was a kind of a fun show to watch. And then there were 2 phenomena I'd found, and what I call the second space phenomena, I just put some symphony music over it that was copyright cleared, and we put it out across Canada, and it kept getting repeated. Every time it was shown somewhere in Canada, the phone would ring, you know, and I don't make copies or anything, you know. I would just tell them to phone the station and get it rerun. And so that's basically how it started.
So essentially you had a bank of recorders that were hooked up to the NASA channel, and then you reviewed. I'm trying to get this down to a sort of a succinct.
Yes.
Then you went back and reviewed those tapes, and you found these anomalous objects on them.
Yeah, I found anomalous objects, and I under no circumstance did I want to get them, you know, to say these are UFOs. I just found phenomena, anomalous objects, whatever. And I've stuck to that word. I've tried to say that I don't know what they are. But MUFON, for some reason, you know, they knew who I was. They know me, and they knew that I was going to be very gentle with it. That I'm not going to go on there. I'm not an activist in the sense of look at this and the government's done this, and so that's what puzzled me. So when I aired the program in my area, I got a call from an artist who works for the Canadian Space Agency on a contract. Now this gentleman was involved in the shapes and you know, things that were depressing astronauts. You know, there was a whole business of, you know, should we draw circles and squares and things like that. He was, and he said to me, this second thing, I've never seen anything like it before, like in terms of the shape. And so he asked to come down. Then he said to me, I have a friend I work with, a colleague, Dr. Weinberg at Simon Fraser University, behavioral lab, a real gentleman. And we should just run this down and see what he has to say, because he could probably figure out what these are. Now, I want to emphasize that we didn't take to Dr. Weinberg little white things or moving things like that. In other words, space phenomena 1. We took this sort of very strange flash phenomena, because he's got like a lot of PhDs, and I knew he would be interested in something very challenging, and it was way over my head. So I went to Dr. Weinberg with him. We spent 3 hours, and Dr. Weinberg basically said, I've eliminated gamma rays, I've eliminated pixels, pixelization, and he did the whole works. And then he said to me, Martyn, you're really going to have to follow the scientific path. You're going to have to make this something that scientists can do themselves. You should go back, record some more, and see if they're really there again and again and again. So that seemed fine to me, and I now had to do another one. So the next mission I taped found the same things, and I didn't want to bother Dr. Weinberg because he'd been very kind. So I tried to decide how much I needed, and I ended up taping every flight from that Hubble mission in '94 to STS-80, with one exception. I also taped STS-82 from CNN, the late John Holloman, a great American. Mm-hmm. He would encourage CNN to go live whenever there was a docking. And I said, Martyn, if this other thing is really there, it should even be there on CNN's tape. So I taped it, looked at it, and there they were. So
now describe what they are, because we haven't gotten into that. You said there's two types of phenomena. Can you describe them?
Yes. The first phenomena is kind of a transparent-looking ball thing. I have no idea what they are. People have said they're ice crystals, but there's distance involved and movement and things like that. I have no idea what they are. But while I was watching that, I kept seeing, because I've spent so many hours in an editing suite, I kept seeing these flashes. I saw something. So I froze the frames, and I would go from one frame to another frame, and it still wasn't there. But the flash, when you went from one frame to another, there'd still be a flash. So knowing what I was dealing with, I realized I had to break the frames down. A frame really has two frames in it. They're called field frames. They're the scanning frames. And whatever this was so fast, it was only being scanned once. So I divided the frames up so that there were 60 frames per second, field frames, whereas normally most home users know that there's 30, regular frames. And that's how I found them. They were all there within that. And that's what I thought was very, very interesting, because this was an extraordinarily fast phenomenon.
And what were they? Was there a shape to these flashes?
Yes. There's a continuity to the shape, and they also are different colors.
Okay, what kind of shape are you describing?
Well, there's either catching it like a streak when you're filming or photographing something and you move the camera, or I would get them when they seem to be stopped, and then then they would disappear, and then they would reappear somewhere else. So it was even, where did they go, and what are we dealing with? And these things are very, very interesting, and I love the elves and sprites and jet things because they're the same. They're very quick. They go up 60 miles, and I thought, well, maybe this is some kind of associated phenomenon. So that's really what it is. And Dr. Weinberg had made it absolutely clear. It wasn't just duplicate these things. He said you need to find more than one, and you need to find multiple colors within one picture, because we're dealing with the so-called vacuum of space.
Right.
And so that's what this second phenomena is. It's something that required an actual technique to be developed. And even though my colleagues were puzzled, they at least complimented me on figuring out how to pull these things out.
Excellent. Now, have you had any analysis of these from independent scientists who've been able to give you an opinion of what these might be, or what's causing these objects to appear?
I don't think you could find a better expert than Dr. Weinberg. He works with the Canadian Space Agency. He works with the people that now build the Canada Arm, Detweiler and Company in Vancouver, and so I had to endure, what people call skeptics and debunkers, and these people would say there's a big argument apparently out there, and these are very professional people saying no, they're cosmic rays, no, they're this, so we're still stuck with the idea that nobody really knows what they are. And that's one of the reasons I came forward. I didn't come forward to say, boy, I found UFOs. I came forward to say, could somebody please continue this work? So, an astrophysicist, I thought maybe, or something like that. But every single person I showed it to had the same reaction: excited, interesting. Like Dr. Weinberg was very, very excited about what he saw. I think he was just tolerating it at me at the start, but it really got intellectually challenging. And so I'm now waiting for somebody to understand that the second phenomena is really, really complex and interesting, and it's in the jets and sprites kind of area. We don't know what they are, but they're there. My technician, this CCD company in Belgium, various experts have all confirmed that the actual streaks and things are actually on the tape. Now,
has anyone been able to identify it as natural phenomena?
No, that's what I thought Dr. Weinberg would do. Mm-hmm. I was a bit disappointed. I have a lot of respect for they call him a skeptic, James Oberg. He appears on our Science Channel all the time, and his first reaction, I have it on an email, is that you've got scratches on videotape, and that's crazy. I'm sorry, but it may work on film. There's a famous filmmaker in Canada that used to actually make animation by scratching it. But if you scratch a videotape, you're dooming the videotape. So I'm really waiting. I'm hoping that someone will come and say, I'm not a UFO hunter. I'm interested, like my friend. And the reason I say that is the individual that was helping me is now dying, so he needs peace, and he doesn't need this anymore. So I'm kind of now just sitting, waiting for somebody to help me, or to take it, whatever it is, because something is happening in the vacuum of space, and there's different scientists that argue a vacuum isn't really a vacuum, or a vacuum is a vacuum. So there's many different kind of areas you can start looking into. But what puzzles me is Dr. Weinberg wanted to do further work on it, and he suggested that we go what the next step was once I followed his instructions. And then when they came out, we received an email sort of threatening to sue us from Dr. Weinberg, and then somebody reminded him that it was me, Martyn Stubbs, and of course Dr. Weinberg then remembered everything that had happened, and these people stopped talking to us.
So you sense this, people backing off, wanting to look into it because of threats to their professional standing, or
a reasonable person would probably conclude that, because when you spend 3 hours with one of the most eminent, smartest, and brilliant men, and he enjoys it thoroughly, it's a great intellectual challenge. He gives me his card. He's going to contact me. And then the next thing you know, I give him some time because, he's a very busy man. He's studying the brain scans and, the colors that are projected when emotion, orca whales, how they talk and things like that. And then when Graham Birdsall in the United Kingdom put out this sudden letter appeared, or, email saying, cease and desist, or I'll throw everything at you. And it shocked me. I mean, it wasn't to me, really. It was to Graham. But the point is that something had changed. And so a reasonable person has to conclude that somebody said, you're not interested in this. You're not interested in this. And I'm not accusing Dr. Weinberg of that. I'm merely saying it could be his personal decision that that's not what he wants to get involved in. Or maybe Dr. Weinberg doesn't want to be involved with the UFO community because it did come out in a UFO magazine. But people are very, very excited when they see this. They get emotional. And it's very beautiful, these things. And even when they printed the two phenomena, pictures of the phenomena, they really hardly showed in here in the United Kingdom, where I am now for a talk on these two phenomena. I think these things are so puzzling that they really have, I guess, ignored them. Even the UFO community can't deal with this, and so I'm taping away, and MUFON's threatening me, and there's all this and that going on, and I'm a journalist, and when somebody says you can't do something or you shouldn't do something that is perfectly legit, I get curious. So I'm always going to be waiting for the phone call with somebody who wants to really look into this. But as far as I'm concerned, I can't give you a strong, definitive reason why that happened. But we then contacted the Canadian Space Agency to the very heart, and I can't, due to the respect I have for my colleague who's sick now, these are his friends and colleagues, but I can tell you that we sent the videotape in, and at first we kept calling, and this person would say, everybody, they love it. The astronauts are taking it home and joking. So this one took it home Monday, this Tuesday, and she said there's one particular astronaut that's sort of really taken to it, and she's and that was that. Then all of a sudden, one of the astronauts who was about to go on the space shuttle was dismissed, and it sent shudders through me. Because I sent this tape in, and so we called again and asked the big question, which was, is this astronaut who has been removed from the mission, and the Canadian government is not obliged to explain at all why, is this the enthusiastic astronaut with the tape? And our contact said, being a very, very honest person, said yes. But went cold after that And out of respect for my colleague, we backed off the Canadian Space Agency. And I'll just leave that where it is. But again, a reasonable person has to speculate that if somebody who was about to go into space and has just become, I guess we could use the word obsessed with this tape, would probably be looking. And to be fair, I would say that maybe they thought, well, they wouldn't do their job. Scott Carpenter once forgot that he was so enamored by some phenomena he saw, he didn't do his instructions right. So there's a history of split-second decisions not being made. So I'm trying to say that I'm not accusing anyone of anything.
Sure, no, I understand. Yes.
Yes.
Now, the spheres that have been seen, do you feel that some of them are behaving as if they are under intelligent control, or at least are maneuvering, as opposed to just floating?
The spheres that I see are both maneuvering under intelligent control, and there's chaos. So these could be two different things, or one thing that has two different ways. You see, not knowing what the spheres are, it's very hard to speculate. So in other words, I had a great mystery on my hands, and I didn't think I was doing anything wrong, and nobody seemed interested. The UFO community was threatening, don't do this, don't do that. I was virtually alone in the middle of the Pacific Ocean with no oars in my boat. I was alone, and it was disappointing.
Anything else you want to share about these? Their history, or their...
Yes, there's each mission that I take. Yes, each mission. Yes, I'd like to share with you one thing, and that is that each mission would have some very extraordinary dialogue between the astronauts. For instance, in one, I'm watching them do a wonderful working job, not looking for these spheres, and the astronaut says, will you look right in front of you? There's an object right in front of you. And the other astronaut treads on his last sentence and says, I don't know what you're talking about. Now, behavioral analysis would think that's unusual. And so then another mission, they put a CCD black and white camera on. Now these second space phenomena that are very, very quick can only be seen with a CCD, because I've checked back.
What's the CCD?
It's a charge. It's the replacement from the tube cameras, which used to give the smearing. It's a charge coupling device, CCD. In fact, it's now old technology. But the black and white, which was to replace the low light cameras that were smearing. My goodness, there were these things again, only in black and white. So I'd say, well, wonder what the next flight's going to do, and I just kept going. It wasn't a plot or anything, but I began to think, why isn't anybody else interested in this? Why am I the only one? Because I tried as hard as I could to see if anyone was even watching these missions, and why I'd lost all my sources to talk to, so I just decided to keep using the intellectual end, and so I do have a lot of theories and thoughts, but as Dr. Weinberg told me, speculation is one thing. So I have a pretty good guess at what's going on up there in terms of these spheres. But I want to make it absolutely clear that, that the process in my mind has not stopped yet, because I have so much of it. And it takes so much time to go through them and go through them. There's so much activity. There's so many spheres. They're around Mir. And I was very concerned because I read the reports, I think it was in 1994 from NASA, about the space debris problem. And here are these things whizzing by as close as you can get to the Mir, which has, you know, Canadians and Americans and Japanese and all kinds of scientists and astronauts. And I thought somebody should be worried about this, if it's space debris. Because even Dr. Lou Frank says that the water-sized comets would wipe out the satellites. So I can't imagine what these would do. And the astronauts' dialogue when these things are all around the shuttle, the dialogue is like, if you got any tea or coffee, any instructions from the ground, everything's clear up here. It's as if it's as if they're not threatening. I liken it to when I was a boy. I would go down and find a school of fish, put my hand in, and not one of those fishes, no matter what I did with my hand, would touch it. They just were able, the whole school would move left and right. So I don't think these spheres are necessarily, I mean, I think if you go by the behavior of the Mir crews and the shuttle crews, maybe they do know something about them, but whatever it is, these spheres are not threatening the shuttle program and the Mir program, and I think the new space station. So that's why I don't really think there's space debris. And like I said, they have different behavior. Sometimes they're going running around like cells do at zero gravity, and other times they're they're going right on up to the shuttle. And you know, it's very hard for me because to get used to this myself. I mean, I'm a human being that had never seen this before. I had to get used to looking at the space environment. I had to learn physics, which I hated in school, and I had to educate myself in order to talk to scientists because, you know, that's the only avenue other than the UFO community and people. I do not visit web pages of arguments and things. You know, I'm more interested in NASA's own web page. And so I was being told that everybody in the UFO community was arguing and this and that and the next thing. And I kept thinking, I'm sure glad that the real path that I'm taking, not them, and was with legitimate scientists that would give me a little bit here and there.
I think that's good.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That's good.
And record.
Good. Thank you. So if you can share with us your name and a description of your occupational history and what your job has been.
Right. My name is Alan Godfrey. I'm a retired police officer. I was served in the West Yorkshire Metropolitan Police here in England from 1975 to 1984, when in 1984 I had to retire through an injury on duty.
Right. And what type of, if you can describe to us it with as much detail in terms of dates and locations as possible, what UFO-related events you had encountered in your capacities?
Would you like me to talk about just the encounter?
Just anything that happened during that time period, yeah.
Right, well the encounter took place, the close encounter took place on the 28th of November of 1980. Myself and fellow officers, 6 in total, witnessed a UFO. 3 of the officers worked in Halifax in West Yorkshire. 2 of the officers was in a town called Littleborough, which is in Greater Manchester, and myself was in a town called Todmorden, again in West Yorkshire. The incidents took place at approximately between 5 AM and 5:15 AM on that morning. The 3 police officers in Halifax who were called PC Howard Turnpenny, PC's John Porter, and policewoman Julie Baxter. John Porter was the dog handler, and they had gone up onto the moors above Halifax to search for some stolen motorcycles. Whilst they're up there on the moors, a front had come in, a weather front had come in, so the very low, thick cloud. When they became aware, below the cloud level was a large blue pulsating ball. It was doing movements, strange movements, not one would expect from a helicopter or an aeroplane of that description. So much so, the movements became so erratic that the police lady, Julie Baxter, got very distressed and got back into the police car. The dog handler, John Porter's dog, started barking loudly at this object, and there was something he sensed, perhaps. The object then came down and what we call buzzed, swooped down and above, and then headed off towards Todmorden. Now, as the road lays to get from Halifax to Littleborough, you can have to travel through Todmorden, or you could go over the moors and you get to Littleborough first. The object decided to go that way because about 5 minutes later, 2 police officers, the names I have not got with me today, and I can't remember, they were in a different police force than ourselves, were sat up Blackshaw Head, which is a moorland road, in a public house car park called the White House, sat there observing below them the town of Littleborough and Rochdale. When they became aware, they didn't see it actually appear. They saw it disappear, but they didn't actually became aware of it until it was actually there. They saw an object hovering between 2 pylons. So much so, they were both mesmerised by it. They reported this incident to their control room, and one of them did a sketch drawing of what they were witnessing. It was only there for several minutes when it shot off, again in the direction of Todmorden. At approximately 5 minutes later, which would be 5:10 a.m., I myself was in the police patrol car heading towards Burnley, a town called Burnley, on the A646. I was going up to what we call a housing estate, a local council housing estate, because earlier that morning we'd been called by the residents of the estate of a herd of cows that had been appearing up and down the road. And on each occasion that we and other officers went to this council estate, the cows weren't there. We searched, couldn't find them. This had gone on most of the early morning, finished at approximately about 3 a.m. So I was going up there at 5:10, merely to see whether the cows, we could find them before we finished our duty at 6 o'clock. En route there, as I was turning up Fernley Road, which leads up to the estate, I looked up the main road which I was travelling on, and I saw about approximately 150 yards up in front of it an object. My first reaction was that it was a double-decker bus, but it was a split reaction. Obviously, whatever it was stopped me from doing what I was going to do. I was going to go and investigate this. So it took me interest straight away. It was obviously unusual. Otherwise, I'd have probably, it's a bus. I'd have still gone and done what I was originally set out to do. Nevertheless, I headed towards this object. And as I got close to it, I got within about 25 yards of the object. And what I saw quite baffled me. I thought one of these hot air balloons had come down. Then I thought, 5:10 in the morning. And I realised that this object was actually hovering off the ground. It wasn't, I could see under, as I'm sat in the police car, I could actually see under the object. It was hovering about 5 feet off the ground. The span of it was taking much of the road up, so it was about 20 feet wide, because the road's pretty narrow just there. And over the top I could see the road lamps. So I'm estimating the height of the object was about 14 feet. And I'm sat about 25 yards looking at it. I put the blue lights on, headlights, hazard lights, anything you can think of. This was totally blocking the road. It was diamond in shape. It appeared to be in two halves joined together. The bottom half appeared to be rotating. The top half looked like it was stationary. And it also, I thought it had dark windows, panels, windows that went all the way around. That was my impression. But it could have been just dark panelling. The first impression I had, there was like a limo has darkened windows. That's the impression I got, but it could have been panelling. I was absolutely gobsmacked. What really was worrying, well, not worrying, it's a strange saying worrying, but the bushes and the trees that line the road on this side, on the right-hand side, were shaking very, very violently, as though there was a strong wind blowing, but my car was perfectly stationary. I didn't feel any vibrations in the car. I didn't hear any noise. It wasn't emitting any noise that I could hear. On this side of the road, you've got a deep gully, like a man-made gully that the river runs down, like a man-made riverbed. The River Calder runs down that. At the other side of the river is the Centrevale Park. And to get into Centrevale Park, you've got to go over this little bridge, right opposite where this object was hovering. Well, there's a lock gate on there. That's important because it does tell you later why I've mentioned that to you. I'm watching the object. I tried the UHF personal radio that all police officers carry on them. Well, they do in England. And I tried the car radio, which is on VHF. VHF is a video in VHF. And none of the frequencies I could get through to our control room. Now, that isn't or wasn't unusual 20 years ago. The radio equipment is much more sophisticated today than what we had then. Also, at that time, approximately 200 yards to the right, was a very large red brick spinning mill that used to spin cotton, huge building. And there are black spots in Todmorden, so it wasn't unusual. I'm not pretending that it was something to do with the object that was causing this, because it could have possibly have happened anyway on that road. I couldn't get any response. I was hoping and praying somebody come along, because what happens? You're in an isolated. Although I'm on a major road artery through the town, and it is 10 past, 5:15 by this time, and one would expect to see light traffic. Nothing. It's one of those things. Nobody, to my knowledge, while I was sat there, was seeing this thing. Only me. I was totally unaware of what the other officers had seen in Halifax. They're on a different frequency. And obviously the ones in Licklebury, because they're a different force. And when I was deciding what to do about it, I thought I picked we carry a pad, a clipboard with all this documents, to issue tickets and all this sort of stuff. And I decided to draw it. While I remember starting to draw it, I can't remember ever finishing the drawing, because at that time there was a large, bright, terribly bright, as though 1,000 photographers had all taken a photograph at the same time, and it was just pure brilliance. And you know that thing you get when you have your photograph taken, you get that blackness. Well, when that blackness had gone, which only a matter of seconds, I was about 40, 50 yards further up the road, actually driving the police car. And if my memory serves me right, the blue light wasn't flashing. The hazard lights weren't flashing, and I didn't have my headlights on, although I was on dipped. I turned the car around, I went back to where this object had been, because it had gone. And on the floor, the road surface, and it had been raining all night. I mentioned the weather front earlier on, but it had stopped perhaps an hour earlier. But the road surface was wet through, but not where this object had been. There was a whirlpool dry surface. There was branches, and when I say branches, I don't mean massive branches. I'm talking, you know, twig type, between a twig and a branch, and bits of, well, leaves, because there were some evergreen trees around there. Most of the trees in November, they drop, you know. But there was branches with trees with leaves on. And there was a bit of debris. Paper, you know, usual, that sort of thing. I immediately then went straight down the road, and the police station is only, from that, is approximately 500 or 600 yards down the road. I was only 500 yards from the police station. Went down there, and whilst I'm going there, my other colleague was walking up on his foot patrol, got him in the car, we went back to the scene, radio was working at this time, another colleague of mine came from the police station, and there was three of us at the scene within minutes of me getting back there. And they saw the debris, they couldn't understand what it got. I told them, this is what I've seen. And we decided to go into the park. So now we did carry keys in those days into the police station to get into the park, to take a vehicle in, you know, but we didn't need, you could get into the park quite easily by climbing over the gate, you know. So we just climbed in, and as we went round the bend to see whether this object had moved into a big park area as opposed to blocking a road, the cows were there. 6, 7, maybe 8 cows, I can't remember off the top of my head. How they got there, I have no idea. Unless they're good at clambering over locked gates or can swim across a river, which is man-made with the drops like that. The only other way they could have got in there was another 400 or 500 yards up the road. They could have gone up a lane to the baths, the swimming baths, across the swimming bath car park, down some steps, across a bowling green, down some more steps, through some bushes, trees, and then they could have gone in the park that way. Quite feasible, but I don't think so somehow, you know. It completely baffles me how they got in there. And they'd come from a farm across the other side of the valley, which was above the housing estate. And we're presuming, unless there was 2 herd of cows running round Todmorden that night, that it was the same herd of cows. How they got from A to B without being spotted other than on the housing estate, it's baffled me ever since.
Do you recall the time difference from the time the flash happened and the time you were then driving down the road?
What I did find interesting about, well, it wasn't interesting, but what I did realise, when this flash had happened, I've timed it, or we timed it, that I'd left the police station at 5 a.m. We're all agreed on that. I took a colleague down to the town centre, which is again is about 400 or 500 yards that way from the police station. I dropped him off. I had a very low conversation with him about he was going to check the shops in the town centre. And then turned the car around, drove back past the police station. Another 500 yards up the road, I come across this object. Perhaps there 2, maybe a minute, 2. I mean, a minute is a long time when you don't know what's going to happen to you. Believe you and me. So maybe 2 minutes, but we'll stretch it to 5, shall we? So now we're about 5 past 10 past 5. There's a flash. I've turned the car around. I've had a quick look. Maybe another 5 minutes. Gone home to the... But when I went to the police station, it was 10 to 6. That's why my colleague, who had only just dropped off, had done his patrol and was heading back to, because we'd all finished at 6 o'clock, and he was heading back to the police station when I called him.
That's about 40 minutes.
Well, some people have estimated 15 on a stretch side. It's anywhere between 15, 30, 40 minutes. Who knows, you know, but there was definitely a large chunk of my life missing, you know.
Do you recall anything from that interval?
No, it was
Instant.
instant like that.
Were there other effects on the motor of the car or any other effects?
You've got to remember, in 20 years ago, even then didn't even think about a UFO extraterrestrial, anything like that. It was just what I was more concerned with, and believe this or not, that thing was blocking the road. It wasn't what it was, or where it had come from. It was the fact that it was blocking the road. That was my chief concern. I know it sounds silly now, but that's how I took the actual sighting. I didn't go, wow, this is a flying saucer, or wow, this is from somewhere from Star Trek or something. No, what the hell's this doing blocking the road? That was more important. So that's the way I'm coming from. Forget E.T. and all that. It never even entered my head.
Do you think now that perhaps this object was not from this earth?
I have been asked whether I think this object was extraterrestrial, or I've been asked, do you think it was man-made? Do you think it was an aircraft or something that you've never seen before? I've no proof that it was extraterrestrial. I've no proof that it was man. It looked to me like it was something that if somebody had shown me a picture of it, or I was watching the news on television, and we'll say AVRO, which is, it's British Aerospace now, wheeled out their new aircraft, and that was it, I'd be gobsmacked. Because it's total nothing like an aircraft, you know.
And it was hovering in silence.
It was hovering about, you see, aircraft fly, don't they? Unless you're a jump jet. Now, this thing was actually hovering, and it was moving. And I suppose it comes in the classic UFO, unidentified flying object status, you know. But is it extraterrestrial? I don't know. I wouldn't like to say it. Other people think it is. People truly believe that what I saw that night was a typical visit from outer space. But
did anyone see it depart? Any other?
As time went on, and I became aware of the other police officers' sightings, it was a great relief to me. You can't imagine what a great relief that was to me, because you can understand being a policeman and my colleagues' reactions within that small community that we have. I mean, the Mickey taking was, just a big joke. Although I have that sort of a nature where I am a very funny person, so I have a humorous side to myself. So the Mickey taking, I took very well, bantering, a lot of funny bantering. But when I found out about the 3 police officers in Halifax, and then months and months later about the 2 police officers in Greater Manchester, what a relief. I'm not crazy. I did see it. I told you I'd seen this. You said I hadn't seen it. I'd imagined it, but I told you I'd seen something. And then there was 2 witnesses, civilian witnesses. There was a gentleman, he was a caretaker at the time, and he was a caretaker of a local high school, or it was a grammar school in those days. Now the grammar school is situated just above the site where I'd seen my encounter. And approximately 5:15, he's not sure, but certainly he went out to fire the boilers up for the school that day at approximately somewhere between 5 and 6 o'clock. Certainly before 6 o'clock, but not before 5 o'clock. He wasn't timing himself. And as he was walking across the schoolyard, which is on a hill, the road's down here, he saw an object come up, go to that side of the valley, moved to that side of the valley, and did that all up the valley heading towards Burnley, which is the direction I was travelling in. A wagon driver who was travelling from Burnley to Manchester, and he was travelling through the route through Todmorden, was in a little place called Cliviger, which is between Todmorden and Burnley, and it's countrified. And as he's going along, he saw an object coming up the valley below it's a deep valley, below the hill lines, and he blinked. Geez, what was that? Never reported it. Well, he had nothing to report, if you follow my meaning, until some time later when someone in Todmorden, because it went into the local rag the following Friday as a mischief. My colleagues did a mischief report to the local newspaper, and there was a little humorous thing in about me having a close encounter with a flying saucer and all that. And somehow this little story found its way to this chap who was driving the wagon. And he must have mentioned it in conversation to someone. And they said, well, that's strange. Have you seen this, So he decided to come forward. I never met the guy, unfortunately. He just happened to come into Todmorden police station and say, I saw an object. And they went, oh, yeah. But I was told about him.
Did you file a report on this, and did the other policemen file a report? And if you did file a report, were there repercussions or reprisals for you doing so?
We've got 5 minutes left.
Right, well, what happened, what we have to do, there was a format, believe this or believe it not, and I didn't know this, there was a format actually in our police station, how to report a UFO sighting to the Ministry of Defence. And you sent it on teleprinters as we had in those days. So my report, together with the 3 police officers in Halifax, because we're the same division, same police force, our report went to the Ministry of Defence within 24 hours. Certainly 48 hours, but certainly when I came on duty that night, I had to do a statement. I presume the other police officers did theirs at the same time. I know they did do them, because I spoke to them, but and I will say that certainly within 24, 48 hours, the Ministry of Defence in London received that report. Certainly did. And I do know that nearly 15, 18 years after the event, they deny ever receiving that report. Because a journalist who was writing a book, quite rightly wrote to the Ministry of Defence and asked if it would be possible to view the report of these police officers. It's been in the media, so it's not top secret. And the letter came back. He's published that letter in this book. I couldn't say the name of the book, Without Consent, or something like it's called. And there, lo and behold, is the letter from the Ministry of Defence to this gentleman, saying, although they've heard of Alan Godfrey's encounter and the police officer from West Yorkshire, blah, 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 we have no record of it.
Were you subsequently intimidated, or I know you mentioned yesterday in your talk that some things had happened with them trying to frame you, and was that something that's a reprisal for your report?
Well, I managed to get on with my job for about 18 months without any reprisals, nothing. Just got on with my job. No pressure, no nothing. Then a story appeared in the Yorkshire Evening Post here in Leeds, and a reporter from there had picked the Adamski file up, which was a big mystery. I think it's all around the world as probably one of the biggest mystery deaths associated with UFOs. He was doing a story on that, an investigative story. When dusting through files, he comes across my encounter, which was 6 months apart, roughly, 5, 6 months. Notice the same police officer involved put the 2 stories together, and though he didn't actually say so, he made the article appear that the 2 incidents were connected, that the 2 incidents had occurred at the same time, without actually saying so, but to the reader, as you read it, it was done in such a way that the two became one. That's when the balloon went up. Oh, and did it go up. I was absolutely amazed at what happened after that. My life just turned upside down in an instant. From being a happy-go-lucky chap, within a space of 6 months, I was put through hell, and I turned into one of the most horrible persons you could ever imagine you come across, purely through harassment, stress, victimization, you name it, I had it.
And this was from authorities within the police or the
Hang on,
military?
let's change the tape, shall I?